Alrighty then. We are, in fact, live here at Escaping Dystopia. Let's go back and see how things are looking. Make sure we are going good. We are, there we go. That's us. Alrighty then. We are in, and that's okay. Welcome. Today is September 28th, 2020. This is episode 113. Entitled, That Was Weird. That was weird. This last year has been a bit odd. We are going to go through some of our other stuff here and talk about this a wee little bit. Other devices, there we go. We got a little bit of screen badness. You know, this is not exactly the most professional setup. Anyway, it's been a couple months since we've talked to you, because that was weird. Our last show near the end of October. Since then, as many of you may in fact know, Donald Trump lost the 2020 election. Now, there are a few people who would somehow and for some reason dispute that. But Joe Biden won. Joe won on his campaign of pretty much nice decency. There was a lot of crossover from Republicans. He won with a large margin. He got a lot of votes. There were a few places where he did worse than in 2016, but considering what's been going on, that's not too horribly, terribly surprising. Donald has never accepted his loss. And we've seen in the days since the election this complete, embarrassing, ridiculous, pathetic, childish, you can go on and on and on. These ridiculous attempts to claim fraud that have never had any basis in fact whatsoever. These ridiculous claims of everything, right, that have never had any basis in reality. His attorney, and we haven't seen him for a couple weeks, Giuliani, ended up getting half the Arizona legislature sick with COVID because he was running around the country doing all these things, and then he picked up the virus. It's been a study in patheticness. I've spoken about this a lot, and how the conservative aspect of current American political running around the situation is just there's nothing there, right? It's an intellectually bankrupt ideology, and I've used that term a few times. But since the election, man, you've really just seen how bad it is. This is part of why, I'm kind of going to be... My plan after the 2016 election was actually kind of step back a little bit from doing political coverage and following this stuff and being involved in the conversation to the degree that I have been. My plan going forward from here is actually to do that. These last 4 years, as you know, the episode counts shows, 113 episodes. We've done a good little bit of chatting with folks about this. I've enjoyed it. I haven't quite been able to put in the effort that I was hoping to on some other aspects of doing this. For example, the website is about 5 months behind, not near the cutting edge level you need to be for anything to have a lot of fun. I never really get into the editing these down to some nice consumable bits. It's interesting, my kids are watching some video game, playing videos, right? Which are quite popular nowadays. And I have some actually out there that I did years and years ago. And I was thinking about that too, and those kind of videos are pretty much always watchable, right? Whenever anybody picks up that video game, be it 5-10 years from now, watching a playthrough, getting a few tips on that will always be worthwhile. Watching old news shows is not something that really anybody does. And so we're going to move to some slightly different stuff than trying to keep up with the ridiculous pace of that kind of thing. The show's not going to go away. I'm going to keep doing it every now and again. and chat with you guys about things or big stuff or anything that's going on or whatever take I need to get out there. I need to re-up my political... So you do this weird authentication to do political advertising on Facebook. And I left the piece of mail sitting on my desk for a couple weeks because I was... Well, I'll tell you about it in a second, but... So I couldn't do advertising for the website for the last few months of the election, even though they kind of shut it off too. But the only annoying part was the Georgia thing, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. There is a Georgia election still coming up on the 5th of January, and then the 6th is when the official confirmation of Biden happens. There's been just some ridiculous things over the last couple weeks. The president did this whole song and dance about how he wasn't going to sign the latest stimulus response that his team had negotiated. He signed it, I guess, this morning or yesterday. So apparently we're going to get the second round of stimulus checks for COVID response. The country needed, 6 months ago, about a month after the first ones to really get this thing under control. One of the things that we did see from the election, and there's a few takes, and we'll come back to this actually in a little bit, but the Electoral College in this country is broken and does a very poor job of representing the country. It's kind of, we can talk about that a little bit more, but it's clear now that it's broken. And I'm going to talk a little bit about, I need to make sure and mention that, the Senate, and what the Senate represents and why it's going to make politics really difficult depending on what happens in Georgia. Let me get this personal stuff out of the way real quick. So, since the election, and why it's like, Roy, don't you do a political show? Why did you not? It's been like crazy stuff's been happening for the last couple of weeks, months. I gotta say, my interest in this crazy stuff that's been happening has not been very, very deep. The just ridiculousness of it, of trying to overturn an election they lost, just the sour grapes, the fighting on a lot of things, we're going to talk about this here in a little bit, has been ridiculous, hasn't been worth it to really talk about. Cable news is a cesspool. Cancel your cable, at least your channels, keep your internet part from your cable company. But, God, those channels are so bad, and hopefully they'll all dry up and blow away now, but I don't think that's going to happen. But anyway, we had another child, Ophelia George Taylor. She was born on November 4th. The day after the election. There was, as my wife was going into labor, it was clear that Donald was going to lose, and Nevada and all of the states that had been waiting to count a lot of their absentee votes had swung immeasurably, or, immovably to Biden's column, and as such, it was not going to shift back, and hasn't. So we found that out that night, and then she was born. It's a whole nother situation we can talk about another day, but I've got 4 kids now, including a little baby, and so the ability to put the time in to produce and get together a nice little show in my basement has gone down a little bit, which is fine, and in a few years maybe we'll pick this up again to the degree that we'd like to do it, right? So you're talking 100 shows over 4 years, right? 25 shows a year, that's 2 a month, one every couple weeks. That's not a horrible pace, right? So we got some other things we're going to focus on. So my daughter was born, 2077 came out, Cyberpunk. It's kind of funny because, I have like only these few hours a day, right? Like I said, 4 kids to actually do anything outside of maintenance and work and that. So I got to do a little bit of gaming, which was nice. And I'll probably be talking more about games moving forward. My kiddos are starting to get old enough to have some fun with that. So we'll probably do a little bit more of that too. Now, and yeah, all right, going along fine. Where we stand, divided. This country, they're unfortunately, and this is again part of the side effect of the whole narcissist thing, is that, because Donald has never conceded, and because his most diehards have fallen way, way, way into conspiracy land, like a ridiculous place, there hasn't been that coming together that would naturally kind of occur in this kind of situation, particularly given, hopefully, whoa, that's not good, how divisive Donald has been, like, his whole time, right? And so instead of having this kind of nice return to a basic normal that a lot of people were perhaps hoping for would happen, we haven't really seen that at all. And instead, a little bit, oh, bam. I just saw it. This caught up to what I did with the camera. So we haven't seen any kind of return to, you know, rationality or normalcy in those senses. So we're going to be very divided, and it's going to make it hard to get stuff done. And the stuff that is going to get done is going to be under that cloud of illegitimacy, which is complete BS, right? And the notion that, especially the dieharders, have tried to bring up that all of the investigations into Donald were false, especially now that he's been pardoning. Oh, that's another thing that he's been doing over the last little bit, is pardoning everybody and abusing the pardon power to the degree that people want to somehow constrain it in the future, which I don't know how that's going to work. But he's pardoned all the people who covered for him with his scam for Ukraine, which, again, ultimately failed. It got him impeached, and then he lost the election against the guy that he was scared of. Remember, he was trying to dig up dirt on Biden in Ukraine. So we have this big divide that is not healing. We'll see politically how it's going to happen. It's, you know, they came together and tried to build the stimulus bill, right, that came out. And he tried to blow it up afterwards with these new ridiculous demands. So the U.S. is, internationally, we're pretty isolated now, in a literal sense, where Americans can't even leave the country because of our COVID outbreaks. I know that at least Canada extended their border closing until January 21st, 2021, the day Donald leaves office. And we'll see. That's been one of the things, and this came out, there was another story today about the transition not working with the Biden team, and they had been going this for national security. There was a large attack on the U.S., right, in our infrastructure, and a lot of our government buildings have now been compromised electronically, hacked, as it were, by, it appears to be Russian operatives, and it appears to be very extensive. The president hasn't really spoken out of it, and certainly not spoken about how he's going to get back at the Russians for doing this. A couple days ago on Christmas, there was a bombing in Nashville. A big one blew up another number of buildings. It was very odd because the guy had speakers telling people to leave the area before it went off. But the president just went golfing for 4 days and then refused to sign this bill that had been negotiated, vetoed the National Defense Authorization Act, which is kind of a standard monthly, yearly thing. That's going to get overridden. So his last two acts were this just kind of ridiculousness. He's really just petered out. There's a question on whether or not he's going to go back even to Washington for the rest of this. He's trying to get a bunch of people to rally on January 6th and make Mike Pence not read the votes for the new election, but I don't think that's going to happen. It's been really sad to see and how it ends. And that's one of the things with the narcissist, personality disorder, is that you have, just that you don't ever get, there's no comeuppance, there's no return to normal, there's no, coda there. It just keeps being bad, and then it disappears, and then he tries to ghost and act like it never happened. So I don't think that's going to happen here because, again, there's been 330,000 plus Americans that have died this year from this horribly mismanaged virus. And you're seeing now with the vaccines coming out, when I last spoke to you, we didn't really have the vaccines coming. Now they have been tested and approved and are out there. People are getting poked with them. But again, because Donald's incompetent and golfing and not paying attention to this, they're having a hard time getting vaccines distributed, and they're like at half the speed, this warp speed. He did, oh my God, when he signed the last bill, and I'm so glad that this stupid is over because it's just been headache-inducing. He signed this, somebody probably told him that he could, right, like line item veto thing. So he signed this COVID relief bill. But in it, he said he's going to line item a bunch of stuff. And also, he took complete credit for the creation of the vaccines. It says, my administration and I created these vaccines. And it's like, you didn't. You didn't do that. And it's unfortunate that there are people, in fact millions of people, who've fallen for this so far now. The betting markets, that was one of the craziest stories, and I shared it a while back. I don't know if I have the link handy. But in the betting markets, right, because people were like, oh, betting markets have Donald, a chance to win, and they said that he was going to win, and that's why I bet, and that's why he won. And, well, it was a chance, and he lost, and also because so many of you were betting on him, they actually had to make it look worse. And that's what's so weird about this. Like, they were the odds makers. They were taking this money for people who were betting on Donald after the election, right? Betting that he would somehow get this all overturned, and so much so that they had to skew the odds to try and discourage people to say, well, even if this happens, you're not going to win that much money. And then they kept doing it. And you've seen this, and this is one of the things, and one of the points I wanted to make today. The U.S. beat fascism at the ballot box. And that's one of the things, that's not a small accomplishment. We beat fascism at the ballot box. And I'll be clear, man, if he had another 4 years to put government officials, to appoint judges, to get control of his party, things wouldn't have turned the way out they did, because you saw these weak points here and there where there was one of the people in Michigan actually didn't certify their state's election, right? And there was no reason for it, really, no legitimate reason. But it still happened after they were invited to the White House. Anyway, so the COVID situation, before I move on to the backlog, we're talking about a situation now where it's essentially a 9/11 a day. And these thousands of Americans, it's 300,000. The deaths are just astronomical. More Americans died this year, I believe, than in any other year in history. And this is all really, it's not all Donald's fault, but there are places where this did not happen. And any other close country, technology-wise, is a half, a third, an eighth, a tenth as many deaths as we've had here in the U.S. And you have to wonder at this point, right? And after this, because I've been following politics and reality here for the last 20 years pretty closely, and you have to wonder about what was the point of these wars and these trillions of dollars that we've spent on military technology and military capability and all this to, quote, export democracy. And I know people are kind of BS on all that. Donald ordered the people out of Afghanistan, so I think we're all out of there other than a few thousand people. And we all knew that Iraq was never a real thing. But these trillions of dollars were spent supposedly protecting Americans. But that was never a real threat to us. And it hasn't been. And even the terrorism threat that we face now is a white supremacist, right-wing terrorism. And so instead of having all this money on infrastructure, on having good-paying jobs, on healthcare systems, on, just like hyper trains and all sorts of things that you can think that we could have built instead of spending this money on guns to blow crap up. And I hope that's one of the big lessons we pull out of 2020. And I don't know how long it's going to take to get up into our governing ears that has changed, that we don't want to keep spending all this money on these guns. We need to start investing another way. And the problem with the military-industrial complex, and it's real, is it's a ton of money. And it's a ton of money that flows, and it's a ton of money that keeps some people very wealthy. And we've seen, too, with the, some of the generals that have really popped up and the degree to which they actually give a shit about our American democracy. And so even then, right, the idea that they're fighting to protect American democracy, but then we see so many of the military actually joining in with the fascists who are brandishing guns at the opposing candidates. There was a caravan of Trumpers with guns who surrounded the Biden-Harris bus down in Texas and tried to slow them down and maybe do a citizen's arrest. There was these people who got arrested in Michigan trying to abduct the governor. These kind of things are out there, and a lot of them are tied to our military. And that we've spent all this money over the last 20 years, and this is what we get out of this, right? A bunch of conspiracy theorists and people who can't just process information and are standing toe-to-toe with white supremacists and fascists and flat out because they hate anti-fascists. And it's got to be eye-opening to a lot of people that the militarism and the police state that we've funded for these last 20 years has not provided us with good value when it comes to freedom, right? It hasn't provided us good value when it comes to healthcare. That our pursuit of freedom, our health, our goodwill, these things, we've all squandered them off this horrible idea that we can pew our way to glory. And so we beat fascism at the ballot box, I think, for a time. But the next guy, when it's Ted Cruz or Dan Crenshaw or some other yokel fucking acting like there's something, we need to be able to ask these questions like, what are we getting out of all this money? And why is it all here? Why, we'll see what happens with Biden. So as far as politics go, the big thing is going to be this election in Georgia, right? Because what this means, the Democrats won the House, so Pelosi will be able to wield her steel arms. The House will be able to pass pretty much whatever they need to. The Senate, because this idiot jerk in North Carolina, Cal Cunningham, I don't know if you heard about this. He was supposed to win pretty easy. He's running against a complete douche nozzle, but he lost because he was sending texts and having sex like once with like some one of the women that he was working with, a campaign aide or something, and then he was just a complete douche about it and lost the race. And then in Maine, Susan Collins somehow won. So this is one of the reasons why I didn't donate to her opponent and even some of the other like $100 million people who got this. So the elections in the Senate, you have to remember the Senate is literally where the land votes, all the people who live on the land. People are always like, oh, well, land doesn't vote in Congress. Well, this is the Senate. The Senate is literally land voting. It's 2 votes per parcel of land. It's called states. And so the politics of those races are much more local. They're not national. And Maine, in particular, is filled with people who basically are like, screw you. We barely are Americans, guys. Like Canadians, way cooler, way closer. Leave us the F alone. And that's just Maine, right? That's like normal Maine. And so when you have all this money pouring in from all these outside places, and they're trying to nationalize a state election, and you have all these consultants, saying, oh, you have to run all these TV ads, and you have to run all this, and you need to raise all this money to do all this stuff, and the people there are like, man, I'm so sick of this crap. Who are these people? I don't even care. Oh, yeah, and then that's where someone like Collins, who knows how to actually talk to the people who live there, it's like, yeah, I agree. All this crap. Forget about it. Vote for me. I'll take care of you. And it worked, right? And so we have just this ridiculous. So the Senate comes down to Georgia, right? It's right now, there's 50 Republicans and 48 Democrats. If the two seats in Georgia go to Democrats, then it's 50-50. And then the president of the Senate, who will be the vice president of the United States, will be the deciding factor. This includes all the rules for the Senate, too, I believe. Now, I'm not an expert in parliamentary procedure, how the Senate works. A lot of that. There's a whole school of knowledge on that. Like, you can spend years and years. Go watch, like, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. That lady who's in that movie. That woman, anyway, there's a whole level of expertise for that, and I don't have it. But ultimately, what my understanding is we can do this, and then we can get rid of the filibuster and basically pass pretty much anything with that 50-50 slide. Now you'll have Joe Manchin and a couple other conservative Dems throwing, all sorts of water on the fire of progressives who will want to do everything if they win Georgia. So I don't see any spectacular stuff happening, but stuff will happen. Now, if one of the Republicans, either of them, somehow wins in Georgia. And by the way, they've been ridiculous, right? Kelly Loeffler is a joke. She she literally is like the marketing lady who married her boss and then got appointed to the Senate. She's like worth like 800 million. She's married to the guy who owns like the Dow Jones. It's like, how are you down? And in Georgia, right? And she's trying to walk this silly line with, oh, the election was stolen and illegitimate, but you need to vote for us because all the Republicans who were elected across the country, those elections were legitimate, but the presidency was not. And it never makes any sense. And if somehow they can win off this crap, and they both, Loeffler and Perdue, both had stock trades related to insider COVID information. Both of them. And it is, so if, like Ossoff, he's tried this a few times. If he can't win this year, he needs to just go someplace else and do something, because it's clear that a majority of Georgians don't want him to do anything. The other guy, Warnock, I don't know much about him, but I think he'd be fine too. But yeah, so that's what's going on. And so, again, so either, the Dems win both seats and stuff gets done for the next 4 years, or the Republicans win either one or both, and Mitch McConnell continues to block everything. And he will. And to think that he won't, or that he cares about how the economy does, or how many people die of COVID, or how many people die of just anything, right? He doesn't care about that stuff. And he just won. McConnell won too, right? So he's got 6 years. He's going to die in office, I think, pretty clearly. And I will not be shedding a tear, because he really just destroyed American democracy. And that's not an overstatement to speak about Mitch McConnell like that and the way he's played. So we'll see what goes on there. So if that happens and McConnell continues to be the roadblock to any kind of progress for the country, and in fact becomes somewhat of a danger to the world, right, considering our climate response needs to become a little bit more intense at this point. I'm curious what Biden's going to do. I have advocated him going nuts on the executive orders and just start doing it. Make the courts rule against you. Make them draw these lines that you can't just start a trade war because you decide to, right? And people have talked about these laws being need to pass to constrain this, and I was like, well, a lot of these laws are already there. We just needed Republican judges to rule that way. And now with the Republican Supreme Court, and I'm going to call them the Republican Supreme Court, they're not supposed to be partisan. That's kind of the whole idea. So when I call it the Republican Supreme Court, understand it's supposed to be just the Supreme Court. But because we have open partisans who are now judges on the Supreme Court, one with the stolen seat, one, we've got Rapey, we've got the handmaid. Alito is giving speeches to the Federalist about how liberals suck and are stupid faces and need to lose everything. So, and they're meanies too. They're meanies. So it's a Republican Supreme Court, and understand that that's a dig, and it's a dig at the system. Part of why I don't want to rail against this so much anymore, because our system, until we fix a few things, it's not going to work in good, rational ways. And as someone who's like, well, we got to fix this, and we got serious needs to fix this, I don't have the energy to keep fighting right now. And I've got kids to raise, so I'm not going to rail against these windmills for a little bit. I can show you where it needs to be fixed and why it's like that. And I spoke about it a little bit earlier. The Senate is broken, and because it was set up as a land holding thing, and because of the states that have multiple senators, North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, Idaho, none of this should all be one state, right? And now you have 10 senators for these 4 million people in Wyoming. And it's like, why is nothing rational happening in the Senate? Well, because 10 of these, 15 of these, 16 of these guys, Alaska, they represent a very small number of people in those states, and they get the same representation as the 30 million people that live, like the 500,000 people in North and South Dakota. The total population is 1.5 million people. That's smaller than most metro areas, right, in the country. And here in Denver, the areas in Dallas, there's probably 4 cities bigger than that. And LA County is like 4.5 million. That's 3 times the size in one city as live in 2 states. They have 4 senators for North and South Dakota. Why? And if you go back and you read the history, it's because, well, it was big business and big oil, and they needed the Senate to always be on their side, and it has been. And so the progressive side of it needs to understand that these are the levers you have to pull. I mean, you're going to literally have to have masses of people move to these states, which we could have, right, with the Zoom revolution if this sticks around. But that's the kind of stuff that's going to have to change, and it's just going to keep being so frustrating because it's fundamentally broken in that sense. And if the sense is you think that the Senate or government should represent the will of the people, and I do, it's not. It represents the will of the landowners. And that's one of the things you have to remember about the current design of the U.S. government, is the land does vote. And because the Senate is so important to the rest of this, that's what's happening. And so McConnell has known that this is the lever, and he's got control of it. This is why the filibuster had to go away before, because they were being so bad about it, and why it had to go down to that bare majority. And so why I'm fine with the Democrats doing this now. But the shift back and forth, right? And one of my things that I've always had a problem with is people who are both-siders, right? Oh, both sides are the same, Republican, Democrat, whatever. The shift now that we're going to see switching back and forth, if this keeps happening every 4 or 8 years, and we can't get a single decade with consistent policies, is that the U.S. continues to be wildly diminished in the world. And things that could have been good or could have been gone go halfway, and then they come back, and all of that effort is wasted. And we have this stuff going on with what we're going now internationally, where now what? The Republican position is like screw over NATO? Because that was Donald's position. And as will come out, I think over the next year, he was extremely compromised by a number of his personal entanglements. This is why I think one of the only things people are like, oh, what are the laws we have to do? Well, one of the laws that we've already tried to pass is that presidential candidates have to release their tax returns. And guess what? The Republican Supreme Court is not going to let it happen. And with the Republican Supreme Court now, even these huge battles for legislation, right, all of this stuff is going to be like, nah, Republican Supreme Court says, nah. I mean, they're going to say yeah to everything. And so one of the big debates on the liberal side will be, well, we have to, the pragmatists, we have to do something that can get through the Republican Supreme Court, which is nothing. And then, the idealist is like, well, nothing can go through there, so let's just do what we want. And so the divide between what's actually going to happen and what law goes into place and how these courts are going to decide this is going to it's going to be a big morass for a while. And I think I'm ready to step back and just say, here's the morass. I understood it at this point. But now I think I'm going to raise some kids and play some games. And when the decision comes to, oh, well, what should I spend my time and attention toward, I'm going to go the other way and step back from this a little bit. So, speaking of which, let's start clearing out the history. So what I have here are, like 50 stories or so. These are from all over the place. This is my backlog on my phone, right? So I constantly am reading, constantly checking news or whatever, looking for nuggets of stuff, interesting things. These are some of the stuff that I leave them all open. And I'm trying to start the year kind of fresh. And I've got this I don't know if you've ever on your phone, Chrome, opened more than 100 tabs, but it just has like this little smiley face. So I got a little out of control with that. So I cleaned out a bunch of them. So I'm going to give you the rest of these, and then we'll talk about stuff and move on, and then we'll call it a year. This year, by the way, I mean, what can you say about it, right? We've dealt with something that very few people alive have had to deal with. And the way that we've dealt with it has been so incredibly strange that I don't know that this might be one of those things that, cracks and breaks the U.S. ultimately. In 2077 Cyberpunk, there's, it's part of the, by 2077, the U.S. has collapsed after the Latin American Wars. And they kind of reveal that kind of history a little bit in these kind of data chip thing, backstories, like books and normal RPGs, if you ever get into some of the reading. That's been a thing for RPGs for a while, where if you actually pick up a book and read it, you can read an old story. And these guys and Bethesda and all the others. Anyway, So that was kind of the fall of that. So this is just one of the things that's happened as 2020 being marked as that year. And as, has been my anticipation for a long time, 2020 was really a year when AI took over. And I don't think people quite realize how much AI is around them in their daily life. We here in the house finally upgraded to a little Wally, as my kids call it, a little robot vacuum cleaner. They're not unimpressive. I think they're on the third or fourth generation now, and it's been kind of nice. And again, it's a simple AI. It's not every AI that's going to be surrounding us is going to be, or attempts to be, or should attempt to be human thought capable, or that kind of general AI thing. But it's true that the singularity has happened. We're surrounded by artificial intelligence all the time, and in ways that are deeply affecting our lives, right? In the sense that even our media is mediated by AIs in a lot of sense. That's what a lot of social media is. All right, so Proud Boys, that's oldest city. Yeah, so these Proud Boy things, this is one of the things that we've seen, and I think this is a natural repercussion from a couple things. One, and I've talked about this before, is in a general sense, right, power, of course, is that zero-sum game. There's 100% of the power is out there in a society. And as power shifts from one group to another, be they demographic or identity groups, those that are having the power shifted away from tend to be fairly uncomfortable. Lately, over the last 10 years, this is probably what Donald was a reaction to, 15 years, maybe even 20, 30, 40 years, white men have been losing that power as our natural both sexist and racist culture has been exposed for what it is, and people have tried to lower that oppression. Now, as that happens and other people gain power, of course, that group loses power, which is where you get the Proud Boys. This is what the whole kind of thing is as people get pressed and they have to find another way to have an identity that gives them a sense of purpose, a sense of power, that's what these kind of groups pop up. As they got so identified with right-wing politics, it's really been just weird. And it's unfortunate, too, because, outside of that, I don't have a lot of interaction with that. Now when I start to, I'm like, wow, you guys are all, wow, this happened, didn't it? And I kind of missed it. Because, I'm not focusing on, the Joe Rogan experience, as it were. But their angle and their take on this move to equality has been very different than my own. And I think that comes from, I have known this was coming for a long time and thought about it a lot. But I guess if that wasn't the case, then, it's extremely uncomfortable, so you fight back, and that's where the Proud Boys come on. Teens expand TikTok to Georgia runoffs. Like I said, the teens are important for the future. They are our next annoying 20-somethings. And so in Georgia, it would be great, because if you can get these kids engaged, that would be awesome. I saw there was a lot of registrations for Georgia, new and different, and they're going to have to live in this Mitch McConnell world, right? And if you have the Senate with all these resource extracting, representing companies, and it's like they're oil and coal corporations with people who originally wanted to take all this empty land and get the representation in the Senate. So now as we move to the big danger facing the world being, the effects of all that extraction, having those same interests represented in the Senate is why the U.S. can't act on so many things. But the kids, hopefully, I think, really understand that. And if we can get the Senate here, we can get started moving forward. If not, it's going to take another, who knows how long. Because in U.S. politics, when you have that kind of gridlock and that inability to move forward, the opposing party always uses that against you. And so it tends to be very effective. Right? Oh, I'll fix all the problems. That's what Donald ran on. Oh, only I can do it. Yeah. You can't. You didn't. But it will sound new and interesting to people in 8 years or 4 years, and they'll fall for it. So this is a little bit here about the bombing in Tennessee. Guy seemed pretty nutty. I don't know. We'll see what happens with that. This is the news story about Donald signing the bill like a baby. because he is a baby, and it'll be so nice not to have a baby anymore. I mean, he's been just so ridiculous for so long, and such a part of it. Hold on just a second. Hey, turn that down a little bit, please. Turn that down a little bit, please. So, sorry. Like I said, kiddos and their streamers. Anyway. Yeah, this is kind of the thing here. Americans' acceptance of Donald's behavior will be his vilest legacy. Oh, hey, buddy. You need me to get you some cheese? Yep, here's cheese. Cheese. There you go. You want to say hi real quick? Here, come around. Say hi. Say hi to the camera. Wave at the camera. Right there. Right there. All right. I'll head back up. Here you go. Take all of them. Thank you. Yep. So that's what I think. My kid's going to have to grow up in this world where this guy was accepted. Yeah? Okay. Hey, Chris! Can you go up to your mom, please? Yeah. And can you close the door, please? Yeah. All right. Yeah, sorry about that. Like I said, it's been a bit frustrating trying to do the show. And this is the thing that's going to come from these. Oh yeah, like I said, my kids have to grow up in the world that he's creating. I know I'm going to have some interesting discussions with some racist parents who don't think they're racist at all. It's going to be fun for them. All right. Despite smooth election, GOP leaders seek vote restrictions. See, this is what's going to happen now because Republicans have to cheat to win. And they're not going to stop because that's the only thing that they can do. And so now they're trying to use this all as, reasons to crack down on mail-in voting and the kind of things that get people out that will, help bury them in history, I suppose it should be, right? As you had this huge turnout, you saw these big Republican losses. And I'll say that there's a little pullback from the 2018 election. A lot of people were like, oh, well, all these progressives went too far. And I was like, well, some of them did. Some of it, you're going to have a little bit of pullback of that because people won in 2018 in places that, there was a bigger backlash to Donald, I think. And I think after 2018 to 2020, some of it was normalized a little bit. And his ability to, put people so far into their camps that they can't even think about, even talking to the other people, which was, that just divisive strategy that he used the whole time. Anyway, so Europe is without England now. They finalized their Brexit stuff. We'll see how that ends up being. I think it's going to be really bad for them because they had no leverage. And now, because they took so long to do that, they're not going to get a good deal with the U.S. either. I hope Biden kind of... I don't know. I don't know. I mean, we'll try and get the best deal we can, but we're dealing with like this little country now that's kind of whatever. So, you're fourth, fifth down the road. Biden has to go back and renegotiate. God. So it's, one of those things that really sucks about where we're at internationally now is that there's a decent chance we're going to be headed to some sort of weird, ridiculous confrontation with China. And now we're going to be doing it from a position of a much weaker position than had we been able to have, for example, the TPP in place. Had Donald just signed that, because recently, I think it was about a month ago, they signed a different trade agreement with the same countries, essentially, that we were trying to do. So after we had stepped out and Donald crapped all over it, they stepped in and wrote the trade rules. Now, the thing about that kind of stuff is that you don't get to do that twice, right? You don't write rules and you don't set up all of this stuff twice. At least, you can, but it's wildly inefficient and it costs a lot of money, and a lot of places don't want to ever do it twice. So as you set up your rules for how to do, digital purchasing or apparently China's pushing really hard with their digital currency, something that we don't really have yet, even as a country, whereas China can write rules with these trading partners that either can require its use or have rules for its use. So now all of a sudden this becomes a way for them to do business with each other, where it's a currency that's completely and utterly controlled by China. And we missed out on that. And so as we move into this next decade, if we have a Senate that's just going to be contrarian, as they're trying to protect the wealth of these, extractors, it just doesn't put the U.S. in a very nimble place in the ability to respond or be smart even and make good decisions. And that's why we see that in American tent cities, a grim future grows darker, right? Because a lot of these places that have just been hollowed out and, it's not going to do anything for them. And it's tough too, right? Because we had this thing, and people are like, well, what are you going to do for rural Americans? Well, Obama gave them health care and expanded this. And what was the response? You're not American, get out. We're going to elect a racist moron. So it's tough to do that again. Like, well, what can we do? And that's the thing that Biden's going to try to do. So we'll see how that works out. Here's another one for you. Donald has been killing people like left and right. They've been, in the first time in 100 and something years, executing people in the lame duck session. A judge said, no, you've got to stop. You can't kill this woman. So they stopped that. Biden is against the death penalty. And so maybe that was part of the rush. Donald wanted to kill some people. And so these people definitely died over the last few months because Donald ordered it and would not die if he wasn't president. So in addition to the 330,000 people, he's directly ordered the deaths of a number of folks. I want to see an investigation into that U.S. Marshal thing, frankly, but that's another deal. All right, so Dominion voting. Yeah, they're suing these idiots for doing all this other stuff. The voting lies. You can only lie for so long before somebody's going to start suing you. We'll see what happens with that. The president also did a bunch of sellout stuff with these weird deals, granting immunity to Sudan in order to get them to do favors to Israel. There's like 3 of these that happen. We'll see what happens over the next little bit as these get reviewed. Apparently, the U.S. Congress is banning e-cigarettes being sent through the U.S. Postal Service, which is stupid. I think this was part of in that omnibus bill. So one of the things that's why U.S. politics is broken, here's a good example of it. Previously, lame duck sessions, which are the sessions that after an election until the new Congress is seated, generally not a lot of stuff would get done, right? Everybody would go home, they'd talk, the president, everybody gets ready for a transition. It's kind of a, peace offering time. And then, I don't know, was it 16 years ago, 8 years ago, it started to be where everything got done in this lame duck session, where because they had done all these continuing resolutions and couldn't pass a budget because Republicans wouldn't agree to anything, and then they would keep going on, and then they'd have these budget shutdowns, and now we're like a week away from a shutdown, and then they extend it for 2 weeks, and then they extend it, and all these budget, and it's just so bad, and it's gotten all the way now, so everything has to get done in these last week or so, in these last 2 weeks, so all this crap goes in these bills. They don't see them until this last week, so there's this ban on vapes, there's all sorts of other crazy crap in here that has no reason being there, and all should be smaller individual stuff, so all of the lobbyists and all the special interests get in this big thing, which has to pass, right? Because if you have to pass legislation, it's worth a lot of money to get your thing in there. That's horrible. Sorry, I'm a little cynical on this, which is why I need to stop. So, this is about the attack. We've been hacked for all summer long, this whole time. Here's a quick story about the MMA and Trumpism. It's just this anti-intellectualism that has bred into a really just bad place. Speaking of which, here's another one. We were like, oh, we need to reach out to Trump voters. Nope, did that, tried, found out who they were. They can reach out back to the rational people whenever they like. We'll see how it goes. Yeah, and here's what's been going on. Oh man, I read this Texas. I don't know if you saw this in the Texas Monthly about some wedding stuff. And one of the things that people have seen this year, is people just have refused to bow to the reality of what's going on, right? And refuse to face the facts that science shows us, and that you just shouldn't be out there testing it. But they have been. And that's why we're going to see 3,000 people a day dying in January again. The deaths on this year, and we're not going to be, until it's over, it's going to be hard to see it. But, I mean, if this was a foreign army invading us, how much would we spend for that? But we can't even seem to really get to there. Here's some of the people. There's a bunch of stories that came out over the last little bit. They're starting to dribble out about how bad and horrid they were changing and screwing up the CDC and other government agencies. I mean, and then here's a nice one on this. Oh, shoot. God, paywalls, man. I need to do a whole thing on why paywalls are stupid. And paywalls are really like dumbing down America. And it's tough. It's a tough situation, right? Because, you have good content. You want to have it generate some value. And so the old model being, well, you have to pay a subscription and then you can have access to the content. But when your content is actually relevant and good news item information, and the alternative that people will go to that's cheaper is just bullshit that people make up that makes somebody think what they already thought, you end up with a whole bunch of people being like, I ain't paying for that. That's stuff I don't like to hear. These people always tell me what I want. And, there was time and time again during the election cycle, there'd be a great news article about something that, really would be worthwhile if more people could read it, but then it's blocked by a paywall. And it's like, well, do you want people to read your stuff? Because you need to understand that the electronic medium is different than the paper medium, and this is something that newspapers never, ever figured out in this country. And it's why they all died so badly. I mean, what's left is not anything close to what we used to have as and this is a news medium, an entire news medium, newspapers, has really died over the last 10 years. And the only ones that are left are a lot of them that are doing the national stuff. So, that sucks. Anyway, I hit another paywall because it was a good thing that I was going to share, but I'm not going to share it because who funds the Federalist? We know thou. It's a bunch of rich assholes. Surprise, surprise. There's a big thing because the Federalist popped up and then all these big writers and a bunch of big money. This is where Alito goes to give his speeches and they pay him like 10 grand. And people are like, well, where's this money coming from? And then it turns out it's, rich people who, happen to have stuff in front of the court. Weird. Weird how that works out sometimes. Huh, kids? All right. Are we going to get through this whole thing? Probably not, man. I'm going to try. Oh, Tulsi. Tulsi, in her last couple acts as a representative of someone, put in an anti-gay and an anti-transgender bill. Oh, excuse me, an anti-abortion and an anti-transgender bill, because she's a horrible bigot and had always been one, and anybody who fell for that crap. Now you know. Now you know why she was so big with the MMA crowd. Oh, weird. What a weird coincidence. So Elon Musk's kind of a douche. He's going to be one of my targets for a little bit. We're giving him nearly $900 million to use his satellites to provide high-speed internet access to his yacht and also rural America. It's one of those things that we'll see how this works out, but I have a sneaking suspicion that the good of humanity is not his motivation. Probably because he's a selfish douche nozzle. All these guys that could... Mackenzie Bezos, she dumped Jeff Bezos. She was his wife. She found out he was cheating, broke up with him, divorced his ass, took a lot of his money, is giving it away, and is revealing just how greedy all of these assholes are, right? So she gave away like $7 billion this year in a way that, and a lot of people were like, yeah, she gives it, and she's kind of, there's no strings attached. It's just, if you need money and it's a good cause, she's throwing money at folks. And she's not going to be a super billionaire. She's not going to be a centibillionaire. She's not going to be, and probably not going to be even like a decibillionaire. I don't know what's 10 billion for very long, because she's giving away all her money. And it just, all those guys who don't give it away, who don't, right? Oh yeah, I guess you could have ended hunger like last week. Yeah, you could have. And that's, you know, her ex, right? Jeff Bezos. It's kind of funny you think about it, right? And this is just came up for Christmas. He's got everybody's wish list, right? He's got the means to deliver all of their presents. He has all of them in warehouses. The only thing he doesn't have is the money to pay for them, which he does have. So, I mean, he literally could have been Santa Claus. He could have fulfilled everyone's wishes for Christmas. Now, if you watch the movie that came out about that for Christmas, that Wonder Woman movie, which that was the plot of that movie. God, that movie was horrid. Okay, sorry. Off track, but that movie was really, really, really bad. All right, let's see. Here's what's going on in Georgia with one of these liars. Nope, that's not what I wanted to do. Wrongo. Do that button. Do that button. Kelly Loeffler lying about these elections. This is what I was saying. Like, they kind of go back and forth about this ridiculous BS they got to crap up. Oh, Galactic Federation of Planets. Oh, yeah. This is the thing. Oh, man, we made it through without hitting aliens with Donald in charge. That's great. Who knows how real this guy is, but the notion that we have aliens here is not a new one. We've talked about this. The Post, Mitch McConnell, GOP Carnival is going to be madness. It will. So whenever McConnell does die, we'll see what's left. The ashes are not going to be pretty. And how he tied together this stuff together and is not going to happen for a while. So we'll see. We'll see. All right, Census Bureau. Oh, the census. We're trying to get this done before Donald's trying to get it done so he can exclude people who aren't citizens of the U.S. The Supreme Court gave him a go-ahead to do. They kind of gave him the blueprint for how to do this a couple days ago. Yesterday? Today? We'll see what happens on that. That's a big story to follow. That's how Republicans, again, break government a little bit more and make our Congress even less representative of people. All right, and then we got another one. AI solves 50-year problem. So protein folding. If you've ever heard about it, really cool thing. Really tough to figure out. Proteins, as they are created, they fold very quickly in ways that are highly complex and also highly functional. So how they fold affects how they work, and when they fold wrong, they don't work, which causes diseases. So people are trying to figure that out. We used AI, and we figured it out 50 years faster than people thought we would. So this is, again, going back to the singularity point, that there's some really interesting stuff. There's a good video on that link that I showed about protein folding, explained about what it is, what the problem is, and what the artificial intelligence solved for us. President, Republicans become deficit hawks again. Yep, so you knew this was happening. It's going to happen, and it's already happening. The spend crazy Republicans are going to turn around and claim that any new spending is not good. Let's see. Choo. How good are we? Got close. We need to take away the children. This is Jeff Sessions. Fucking paywalls, man. We'll share this with you. This was the worst thing that happened in this country in a while, and hopefully somebody will be held accountable. And I might have to make that a bit of a focus. We'll see how this goes. But man, what we did on the border over the last few years was inhuman and inhumane. And there's not another way to put it. And it's one of those things that was so horrible that people had to reject and lie about the fact that it was even happening. The political debate wasn't about whether or not we should be doing this, but no, that's not real. He's not really doing that. Yes, he is. It is that real, and it is that horrible. No, it couldn't be that horrible because I'm a good person, and I would never support that, and I support him. And so therefore it's not happening. And that was the kind of thinking that was going on. And I realized at that point that these people would be fine with concentration camps because they would just deny that they existed or what they were or that anybody was dying in them. And that was when it just really got bad. All right. Anyway, here's another one. Oh, another paywall opinion. Yeah, man. All right, so here's the last one, or one of the last ones. I think I kind of got a little out of control there, but we're about done here. It's been my hour. My year is up. This QAnon stuff somehow has disappeared a little bit. Weird how that coincided with social media stopping promoting it. This will be one of the big debates over the next little while, and this one I will be engaged in pretty extensively because this is a little bit of my background. It's where my education was. I've been doing this for a long time, so I have some, I think, pretty well thought out ideas about social media and mediation and moderation and this whole Section 230 stuff and what the responsibility is of these companies to make sure that lies and misinformation and intentionally targeted misinformation and all sorts of other aspects of it don't continue to spread in ways that they shouldn't. And that we have to deal with this crap constantly, and that the source of this is these same companies who've made billions of dollars but won't spend the money to clean up their crap. And so we have crap everywhere, and they've got all the money, and they're not using it to clean up their own mess. So we'll see to the degree that we can even do that moving forward. Because again, you have this entire industry that's represented by only 2 senators, not 10. And so we'll see if they can switch that around. But the compromises you have to make when you're in that kind of position are not pretty, which is why they've had to fight so hard to keep this bullshit alive, I think. Because if they have the Republicans turn on them too, they did. All right. I think that's about it for my show. I've been doing some stuff here for today. We got through a lot of our history stuff. Here's the social media one. I think I was just going to share. Yeah, here. This is from the Technology Review at MIT. It's some good reading. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Online platforms aren't transparent about their decisions. And that's the thing, too. Stuff is so arbitrary, right? And now I've got it tied to my VR headset. I think if I get banned on Facebook, I don't think I can log into my games. And as there's going to be some mergers, and we'll see probably a downturn in the economy, one of these companies is going to buy the other. And what happens to Google, Facebook, or Apple, Microsoft, or, remember, AOL, Yahoo? That's probably what's going to happen. Somebody's going to really overpay for a bunch of crap that doesn't make any money or is about to die. Anyway, thank you for joining in. I appreciate it. Together we will escape this dystopia. We did this, man. You knew after Donald was elected it was going to be really bad. You knew that a lot of people were going to die. You knew that a lot of lives were going to get out of control. It sucks that it's been as bad as it was. I don't know that he would have lost if it hadn't been for the pandemic, or I should say, for his horrible, pathetic handling of it. It did take everybody to get out and vote as much as they could. And I think every vote mattered this year, even if it wasn't in a swing state or in a place where, they all mattered, because the point was showing to massively reject fascism at the ballot box. And over 80 million people did that. And that's a lot of people voting. Now, the fact that 70-something million voted for fascism, it's a problem. Not gonna lie, that's a problem. It's a problem. So, but it's not my problem. Not today. And probably not with the passion that I've tried to attack these last 4 years. So, with that, I'll bid you a bit adieu. I'll say good day to you. I will be back. I spent stuff on equipment. There's no reason not to use it. We'll see how much more Escaping Dystopia goes. We're going to get all of our shows uploaded and all of our media platforms consolidated, whatever. We'll keep it going. But don't expect a show a week. Unless we rest another Unless we really, some weird shit happens. I don't know. Knock on wood, man. But that's why this was a purpose-driven show, and we beat a decent part of that. Now the question is if we can build some trajectory to get out of here and start making some real progress as a species. So I'm going to shift a little bit of my efforts on that to a few other places. But we'll still be talking about stuff. Still be talking about Spaceship Earth and some other things. So with that, I shall bid you adieu. Good day, sir and madame. I wish you well. Have a great 2021, y'all.